Hey, I see you there. You know what I know? I know you like protein.
I love protein.
Protein.
Or weapons. How many weapons? Yes, that many weapons. And you like to really bring the pain to the demons of Sanctuary or the Burning Hells or the High Havens. Listen, I don't know where Diablo 4 is going to take us. What I do know is that if you hop on the Barbarian ride, you're gonna enjoy your time and feel amazing while at it. Now, if you're not new to Diablo 4, you might recognize Barbarian from other Diablo games and of course other RPGs, whether or not they are ARPGs or MMOs or anything like that. You see this. This is the warrior. This is the I take my weapons and I smash you in the face as hard as I can until I get so angry you die. That's pretty much Barbarian. Now, obviously, there's a lot more going into Barbarian, and you might think, listen, I have played Barbarian for years now, and I am well versed in the art of smashing. Well, fair enough, it's not particularly complicated. However, Barbarian does have new things coming for it in Diablo 4, so whether or not you are a fan of Barbarian or thought about actually maining it as well, is it the best class for you in Diablo 4 once the game releases in just a few short weeks? Well, let's actually explore what you can expect from the Barbarian to figure out exactly if it is for you. And in due fashion with all of our videos so far, we're gonna go over the skills a little bit, because although this is just like a general presentation, sure, you can do this on your own as well on different multiple websites, but what's important is that we do it in a cool style while you sit back and watch this awesome gameplay and just hear me talk about stuff. First of all, on the weird off chance that this is your first time watching Barbarian content, you need to know that now you have all of the weapons. All of the weapons are on you at the same time, and certain skills will require certain weapons to be used, and certain skills can be used with multiple type of weapons. So let's just slowly get into it, starting with Bash, which is pretty cornerstone of Barbarian. For this, you'll need a bludgeoning weapon. Think of maces would be able to be used with Bash. If for some reason you have no maces equipped, you might not be able to use this. Similar with Frenzy, you will need a dual wield setup to be able to use this particular ability. And I mean, most of these things do already what you know. Bash is basically striking an enemy super hard, dealing extra damage, and after you're bashing 4 times, your next bash will stun for 1 second so far, and it increases to 2 seconds if you use a two-handed weapon. So yes. And we will get into the choice of weapons, weapon types later into the video. Stay tuned. Frenzy is what you probably already know. You unleash a rapid flurry of blows, dealing 20% damage with each pair of hits, and if Frenzy hits an enemy, its attack speed is increased by 20% for 3 seconds up to 60%. Basically, the more you attack, the faster you attack, and then means more damage you do. Pretty straightforward. Moving on, Lunging Strike. This is fairly kind of new, but not really. It's kind of like a charge. Listen, what you need to do is that you lunge forward and strike an enemy for 30% of your damage. To do this, basically, you require a complete arsenal weapon. This, we don't essentially know what it means, because you start with all of the weapons, right? And you're never not gonna have weapons on you unless you just throw them on the ground, because heck, to hell with everything, which is pretty silly and stupid, so never do that. So I would assume that you'll always be able to use Lunging Strike. You won't need a specific type of weapon, you'll just need all 4 of your weapons to be on you. Flay, on the other hand, is also one of the basic abilities that generates your resources, and we're going to talk about that in a second, and this applies bleed, hence you probably will want a slashing weapon. Think of axes and swords and things of the like. You flay the enemy, dealing a little bit of damage, and inflicts a little bit more damage over 5 seconds. And this bleed seems to be stacking until its HP bar can be all just bleed dot damage forever for the eternity. And speaking of the resource, just to get it out of the way, it's pretty much what we had in Diablo 3. It's called Fury. You only generate it during combat, so out of combat it will start to dip, which is it wasn't particularly amazing in the first session of the beta, but likely this will be improved upon. And the more you attack, the more Fury you get, and you spend Fury on core skills. Since a lot of these core skills are pretty iconic for Barbarian, whether you played it in Diablo 3, whether you played it in Diablo 2, whether you played it in other games, I won't stay too much on them. For instance, Whirlwind is pretty self-explanatory. You can use it with any arsenal weapon that you possibly can have. Hammer of the Ancients, not really. You will need a two-handed bludgeoning weapon to be able to smash your enemies with a big hammer on their faces. Upheaval is also a big hit that you use a two-handed weapon for. You have to. You cannot use it with one-handers or dual wield or whatever. Then you just throw the ground at your enemies, dealing damage with dirt because why not? You can do it, so let's do it. Double swing, pretty self-explanatory. For this, you will need dual-wielded weapons to strike your enemies with both weapons, and the ones that are like directly in front of you will take extra damage because they, get hit by both of those weapons. While rend, self-explanatory as well, with a slashing weapon, you will cleave enemies in front of you, dealing a lot of bleed damage over 9 seconds. And of course, all of these come with their own subsequent skills and passives that augment them for more power. But let's see what other tools you have to maybe even survive, because we all know the memes. Barbarian is kind of squishy, or maybe not anymore, but let's see what you can do to not be squishy. Ground stomp is something that you might have seen in other games as well. You stomp the ground, because that's usually what warriors do. You deal slight damage, but you also stun enemies for 3 seconds in AoE. Pretty cool. Rallying Cry is the first shot that we're gonna showcase, because you cannot be a warrior slash barbarian without yelling really loudly to get certain bonuses. You bellow Rallying Cry, increasing your movement speed and resource generation for 6 seconds for you and your nearby allies, because you're generous like that. Challenging Shout is yet another scream where you taunt nearby enemies and you also gain 40% damage reduction. It's quite a bit of damage reduction, especially if you play solo. This will likely not impact your gameplay in any way because you're going to take all the enemies on you anyway, and might as well have some 40% damage reduction while you're at it. Iron Skin is very similar to Diablo 3 as well, in the sense that you get tanky by pressing it, and the lower HP you have, the better the skill becomes, because it takes 50% of your missing HP and puts it as a barrier on you for 5 seconds. And as you level more, you'll start to unlock brawling skills, which are really cool because this is what you see in movies. Kick is something that you do to people in your group that don't do damage, or actually you can use this ability on the enemies to kick them away, dealing a little bit of damage, but if you kick them in a wall, they take more damage and get stunned. Because terrain usage is really awesome, and I like using kick and push enemies into walls. By using War Cry, you bellow a mighty War Cry, increasing your damage dealt by 15% for 6 seconds and nearby allies for 3 seconds as well, just damage gain. It's pretty self-explanatory. Charge, oh thank god we had this back because this was so cool in Diablo 3. You become unstoppable, which is a mechanic where you cannot be crowd controlled whatsoever, not slowed, not stunned, not rooted, not feared, not anything. You are unstoppable and you rush forward, pushing enemies with you, then swinging through them for 25% of the damage and knocking them back. This is so cool and obviously very cornerstone of any barbarian player out there. Leap is my personal favorite, where you leap in the air with anime-like powers and you slam down, dealing big damage, and you knock back surrounding enemies on impact. And you can even use this to traverse terrain. If you have seen any amount of gameplay for Diablo 4, you will know that there are cliffs to climb and go down from, and ladders and stuff, and you can traverse all of that with Leap. I don't know if it's necessary, since it does have a 17-second cooldown and you can still traverse those terrains without actually having any combat effect whatsoever, because you're kind of immune while you're climbing down or climbing up, but it is an option that you have that not every class has. And moving into what makes a barbarian, barbarians are the weapons and muscles, but mostly weapons this time around, because we start with the weapon master skills. Rupture is exactly what you think it is. A very short cooldown. You skewer enemies in front of you, dealing a little bit of damage, then rip your weapon out, damaging enemies for their total bleeding amount that has been accumulated on them and removing all bleeding damage from them. So essentially what this does is it takes all the bleeding that you've put on a target and it deals it instantly, which is really cool. Death Blow. Oh man, this sounds so cool, man. Shit. You attempt a killing strike, dealing a lot of damage. Well, a lot is, a lot said about Barbarian, but listen, no, the dev said that the damage will be high later game, so we'll see. But you do deal 120% of your damage to enemies in front of you, and if you do end up killing an enemy, its cooldown is reset, So, chain combo kill large packs. Yes. Steel Grasp is something that we should have had as Barbarians since Diablo 2. You throw out a trio of chains that deals damage and pulls in enemies. Because if leap and charge are off cooldown and you cannot get to them, you bring them to you because, you have the power. And last but not least, the ultimate skills, which are things you will probably be familiar with and some maybe not. Call of the Ancients, very iconic for the Barbarian. You essentially call the three Ancients to aid you in battle. Korlik would leap at targets dealing damage and swinging in a frenzy for even more damage. Talek will spin amazingly fast around him, dealing constant whirlwind damage. We've seen this before. And Matawak upheaves the ground, dealing a lot of damage as well. Right now, we don't know how much this damage will be because the tooltips are not very indicative, but obviously this will scale with your gear and your level. Yes! Wrath of the Berserker is yet another kind of iconic ability as well, specifically from Diablo 3, where you explode into rage, knocking back surrounding enemies and gaining Berserking and Unstoppable. We'll go into Berserking in a second. We already discussed Unstoppable, and this will last for 5 seconds. For the next 10 seconds, dealing direct damage with basic skill grants Berserking for yet another 5 seconds. So at least the Berserking buff, you can extend it for, I would imagine, 14 to 15 total seconds if you optimize your abilities properly. And a new addition, which is pretty much quintessential to how Barbarian is identified in Diablo 4, Iron Maelstrom. As you can see, this is a fat tooltip on your screen right now, so let's get into it slowly and surely. First of all, this is a 3-pronged attack. You use this ability 3 times. The first use will make you use your two-handed bludgeoning weapon to slam into the ground, dealing a lot of damage and stunning enemies for 2 seconds. Next one will use your two-handed slashing weapon to swipe in front of you, dealing this decent damage as well, but also putting bleeds up, while the last hit uses your dual-wield weapons to swing around you, dealing a lot of damage per hit. This is a big fat cooldown. It is on a 1-minute cooldown. Hopefully there will be things to lower it to a respectable amount so that we can actually have fun by using all of our weapons all together all the time on all the enemies. This is really cool. And with this, we can probably go into what makes Barbarian so special in Diablo 4. We all know that classes will have specific systems akin to them. While druids have spirit boons, sorcerers have enchanted abilities, barbarians have the arsenal system, which you'll probably be very aware of very early on because it is enabled right at level 5. The arsenal system means you can equip one big bludgeoning two-handed weapon, one big slashing two-handed weapon, and 2 one-handed weapons for your dual wield skills. And all of your skills will use their respective weapon for their maximum gains, but you can also assign different weapons to different skills if possible. If the skill is not specifically restricted, you probably cannot use a big mace on a rend-like ability because you won't be able to cause the bleeding. And I mentioned Berserking before. Berserking is a buff that you gain from different skills and passives. What it does so far, until further notice, it will give you damage and movement speed. Right now it gives 25% damage and 15% movement speed, likely to change based on tuning and class balance. And of course, going back into the arsenal, because this is the actual cornerstone of the Barbarian, you'll get a second skill tree leveling tree, kind of, which is the weapon expertise. Every weapon that you use has a little progression system where it gains experience the more you use it. When you hit with a weapon, it gets some experience, and each weapon provides a bonus to your attacks based on that weapon type. We won't go into all of them. You can see them on the screen. There's fairly quite a few of them, and obviously the numbers will likely change, so don't get hung up on the numbers too much. But as an example, you have one-handed maces that make you deal extra damage to stunned targets. One-handed axes have higher crit chance versus injured enemies. Two-handed swords cause a percentage of their damage to also be bleed damage, and so on and so forth. And once you get these to max rank, to max level, you get even powerful bonuses on top of all of this, while the other original bonuses will keep scaling linearly until you have like a big leveled up arsenal to deal a lot of damage. The weapon expertise system wasn't accessible on the beta when we tested it, but it's sure going to be on the live servers, so this is kind of what you need to expect when going into Barbarian. there's a big emphasis on weapons. All of the weapon types. You can mix and match different weapon types based on your build and what you want to get out of it. You go for a full bleed build. Maybe you'll just want more slashing weapons and so on and so forth. And unless you just throw your weapons down on the ground, you should be fine using all of your abilities because you have all of the weapons for all the abilities. Did I say that enough? Listen, Barbarian is a beast and it's looking like the only thing's missing is the kitchen sink. What do you think? Is this a class that makes it look like it's turbo fun? It could be the best class for you. And okay, I get it. We see the comments. Best class doesn't mean the highest damage, guys. It's also about fun and fantasy and flavor and builds and all of the stuff that can make a class. Because with this, we conclude our class overview videos and we'll have more in the future. If you like the type of content that we do, consider hitting that like and subscribe button. As you can tell, this is a fairly new channel and we love to do this. We're definitely going to be doing this for a lot longer. So helping the channel grow will be super appreciated by us. Thank you very much and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!